Hi, I'm Allison. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 reads of 2016. So these are my 10 favorite books that I read in the year of 2016. And I'm just going to jump right in. First we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is about a woman named Lily whose father has just died, and they had really a bad relationship because her father was actually abusive to her mother. So she's kind of dealing with all of that, and then she meets this guy, and he's a doctor, and he doesn't do relationships, but they're gonna. So it just kind of tells their love story. But also, while this romance is kind of kindling, she runs into her first love from high school. So she ends up reading a bunch of her old journals from high school and going through, and so you kind of read about her first love story and the current love story. So you get both stories, and it's really interesting. And I think I can tell you this without it being a spoiler, but the journal entries that she writes, when she wrote them, she was too cool to write in a diary. So she writes them as letters to Ellen DeGeneres. So she talks to Ellen about like her TV show and everything because she watches a lot of Ellen. So it's really funny and fun, and it makes that part of the story more enjoyable in my opinion. But it's a very dramatic read. There's a lot of drama. It's very intense and very heavy, and but really good and really satisfying in the end, I thought. This is only the second Colleen Hoover book I've read, and I've decided I need to read all of her books because she's so good. But I guess she does, as far as I can tell, they all seem to be a little gut-punching emotionally, but they're still so, the ones I've read have been so good, and this is one of my favorites of the year. So that's number 10. Number 9 is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This is about a woman who is a reporter, and she gets sent back to her hometown to investigate the murders of these two young girls. And so it's a really small town, and she kind of knows everybody, so it kind of goes with her like interacting with all these people that she hasn't seen in a long time, and it's really just but it's a really good story. Gillian Flynn has this way of writing characters that you don't even like, but you really care about their story and you really get invested, and the story just sucks you in and you have to read it even though you're kind of repulsed by it at the same time. I don't know how else to explain it. She's very dark, and so if you've read Gone Girl or anything, you know that. She's very dark and twisty and everything, but it's so good. The mystery is just so good. It keeps you reading. It's a short read. It's easy to read. I recommend it. If you like any of her books, this is another one of her. It's good. For number 7, I picked Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Grisha trilogy. You've probably heard of the Grisha trilogy. I read the first one a long time ago, but I didn't continue on with the series at the time for whatever reason, but I reread the first one this year and finished the trilogy. And I really loved the second one. The second one was my favorite for sure. The first one, you probably know what it's about. It's about the Grisha are these people with magical abilities, and they all kind of fall under these different categories as far as what their powers are, and they're all led by the Darkling, who's the most powerful of all the Grisha, and he kind of commands darkness, I guess is his ability. And then Alina is discovered as being a Grisha, and she's the sun summoner, so she can summon light, so it's kind of the opposite of the Darkling's powers, but kind of not. But anyway, she ends up going to like the Grisha school, I guess you could call it. The Darkling takes her to where the Grisha live and train, and he wants to train her to use her powers and to be stronger and more powerful, and he kind of has some ulterior motives, perhaps. We're not really sure what his deal is. It's kind of very mysterious, and there's a lot of different characters with a lot of different agendas, and it's really interesting, and it's a good read. But I liked the second one even better because I felt like it was a little more of an adventure, I guess, and I like the new characters that you meet in the second one. Cough cough Nikolai. But this one was my favorite for sure. I felt like it was really a fun, epic story, and I read it so quickly. It was so good. I loved it. So number 7 is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I can't imagine that you've been on BookTube to watch anything without hearing about this book at some point. The second one came out this year, and it was kind of the big deal, I guess, of the year. But this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling set in the world of the Fae and other magical creatures and stuff. So it's just like a really high fantasy, awesome adventure, and it actually followed the Beauty and the Beast plotline a lot closer than I thought that it was going to, but I really love that. I love Beauty and the Beast, and I love fairy tale retellings, so this is a really great one. I mean, Sarah J. Maas is awesome. Like, she's my queen. I bow down to her and read everything she writes. She's so incredible. And this was no exception. This is such a good read. I highly recommend it. So, my next 3 books I'm going to do together because they're part of the same trilogy. The whole trilogy made it to the list. I read The Remnant Chronicles by Mary E. Pearson this year, and I loved them. The first one is called The Kiss of Deception. I've had it for a long time, but I've only picked it up this year, and I thought it was going to be more of a light, fluffy, like romance story, just kind of set against a fantasy backdrop. But it turns out it's so much more than that. It's actually really, really good fantasy trilogy. The world is really interesting and has a lot of history to it, and you learn about it gradually as the series goes on, and it's just really, really good. It's about a princess named Leah who comes from a long line of first daughters in her kingdom. All the first daughters in her family line have been born with the sight, I guess. They call it the gift. They always refer to it as the gift, but basically they're seers. They can kind of see the future, and they just know things before they happen, and just know things. So it's pretty cool. But unfortunately, Leah doesn't have these powers. She's never had a vision, and she's never been able to see anything. And so when her father arranges a marriage between her and the prince of a neighboring kingdom, she feels like he's trying to like sell her to this kingdom under false pretenses, basically, because they want a seer, is what she thinks. So in combination of that and just the fact that she doesn't want to be in an arranged marriage, she's never met this guy, and she wants the chance to meet someone and fall in love. You know, she's like 16 or 17. 17? I don't know. Whatever. But she, so on her wedding day, she and her friend run away. They flee the kingdom and go and live in this really small village for a while. They kind of make themselves a life in this small village. Everything's going okay, except one day, 2 handsome strangers come into the inn where they work, and they kind of capture Leah's attention, and they also seem to be paying quite a bit of attention to Leah. What Leah doesn't know is that one of these guys is the prince that she ran away from. She had never met him, so she doesn't know what he looks like. So he tracked her down and found her, and so you're not really sure what he wants from her, but neither is he, so it's kind of interesting. But the other guy is an assassin that's been hired to kill Leah, so you're trying to figure out kind of which guy's which and what they want from her, and it's kind of a love triangle, which is what I was expecting the story to be. I love a love triangle. Like, I know people think they're overdone, but I'm a sucker for a good love triangle. I always love it. And this is a pretty good one, but it's so good, and everything's going, you know, there's a lot of mystery and intrigue, and you're kind of reading, and you're like, oh, this is good, but then you get to a point, and it's just awesome. You're like, wait, what just happened? And the whole story kind of turns around and goes in a different direction, and it's just really, really good, and I loved it. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of action more towards the second half, I guess, and that leads on into the second book, which is The Heart of Betrayal, which was my favorite of the trilogy. I loved this one so much. It was, I guess because the setting was a little different, there was a lot more, it felt like there was more at stake, I guess, and you also learn so much more about the history of this world. And it's just so interesting to find out how everything kind of came to be and how everyone got taught the history in different ways in each different kingdom. And it's just really, really interesting. The characters there's a bunch of new characters in here. They're very interesting. All the interactions between all the characters are really just really interesting. Everything's really interesting, and it's just a really good book. I loved it. I loved it. My third one is The Beauty of Darkness. It came out this year, and I really liked it too. I'm not going to say anything about it because it's the last one, and there's nothing I can say without spoiling, of course. So anyway, I'll just say a lot happens in this one. It's a chunky book, so quite a bit happened, and it was a really good ending to the trilogy. I really loved this series, and I enjoyed reading the whole thing this year. So okay, so bringing in my top 3 of the year. Coming in at number 3, I picked The Invasion of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is the second book in the Queen of the Tearling trilogy, and I just loved it. This was my favorite of the 3. The first one would probably be in this list too, but I technically read it last year in 2015, so didn't quite meet the criteria. But this one was my favorite anyway. I can't tell you what it's about because it's the second one and I don't want to spoil anything, but the first one, it's about this girl named Kelsey who is the queen of the Tearling, but she grew up away from the kingdom. She's been raised in secret to keep her safe. So she's been living in hiding kind of with her 2 guardians, and they're kind of the only people she's interacted with, but she reads a lot, and her guardians have tried to teach her what she needs to know to be a good ruler, but they've also been keeping a lot of secrets from her about the kingdom, and particularly about her mother, because it turns out her mother was not a very good ruler. Her mother was assassinated when Kelsey was a baby, and that's why she's been living in secret. Did I already say that? I don't know. But that's what happened. And so she's had to wait until she reaches the age of ascension, which is 19 in their kingdom. So when she turns 19, her mother's Queen's Guard, who's now her Queen's Guard, they come to get her and bring her back to the castle and to claim her throne from her uncle, who's been ruling in her stead as regent until she came of age. And her uncle is the worst. Oh, like I cannot think of a character I hate more than I hate him. He is the worst. He just makes me want to vomit. I can't stand him. Ugh. So she has to go get the kingdom back from him. So her uncle's basically run the kingdom into the ground, even worse than it was, and he's been kind of the pet of the queen of a neighboring country. The queen of Mortmesney is known only as the Red Queen, and she's a sorceress who kind of has everyone under her thumb in one way or another. She's got all the kingdoms around her kind of cowering to her, and even more so with the Tearling because it's been so poorly ruled for so long, especially under her uncle. He's the worst, and he's just like, she's got him in her pocket and he does whatever she wants, and he's just ugh. And so there's so much corruption, and everything is so crappy in the Tearling. And so Kelsey has to get back to her throne, claim her spot, and then fix everything, you know, at least as best she can. She's trying to save this kingdom from complete ruin, and so there's a lot of interesting things. She's a really cool character. She's really smart. She's really tough, and she sticks to her decisions, and she's fair, and she accepts help when she needs it, but she's also doesn't really take shit from anybody. She's a really good character. I really love her. She's one of my favorite characters probably ever. And it's just a really good story, and it's really interesting to see how she goes about fixing things and the decisions she has to make. And there's also some magical elements for her character as well. I don't really know how to say it without kind of spoiling things because it's all very mysterious for a while. You're not really sure how her magic situation is working. But it's a really good book. I mean, it's a really good trilogy, and the second one was my favorite, so it's number 3 on my list this year. So, yep. The top 2. This was the biggest decision. It physically pained me to have to choose between these 2 books because I love them both so much. As I may have mentioned before, I'm not sure if I did, Throne of Glass is my favorite series of all time. And I had to put Empire of Storms the newest addition to the Throne of Glass series is only my number 2. I had to put it at number 2. And it's so good. I can't say anything about it because it's the 5th book in the series, and there's literally not a thing I could say that wouldn't spoil something or everything. But if you haven't read Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas, go read it. I don't know what you're doing. Everybody needs to read it. It's so good. I feel like, because sometimes I worry, I'm like, oh, I hope I'm not overhyping it for people, but I don't think it can be overhyped. It's so good. And it's just my favorite. And these are my favorite characters of all time. The story is so, so good. There's so much to it. There's so much going on. It's just the best fantasy series I've ever read. And it's my favorite series I've ever read. I love it, love it, love it so much. The only reason Empire of Storms did not make it in the top spot is because A Court of Mist and Fury made it in the top spot. This is also by Sarah J. Maas. It's the 2nd book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and this is the most fun I have ever had reading a book. I love reading, so reading's fun to me. This is the most fun I've ever had reading a book. It was so good. I had the house to myself one weekend when I was reading this, and so I got to be very loud about my reactions, so I was just like, I was giggling like an idiot because Resend, oh my goodness. And I was yelling at people, I was cussing at people, I was snapping in people's faces when they got what they needed to hear, and I love it. I can't say much about it because it's the 2nd one, but it's so, so good. I'll probably do some kind of book talk on this and probably the Throne of Glass series as well. Because there's so many spoilers that I want to yell about, but I can't because I don't believe in spoilers. I don't want to spoil anybody. But yeah, this was my favorite book that I read in 2016. It was so much fun. I just loved everything about it. It's so, so good. So those are my top 10 for the year of 2016. Those are my favorite books that I read, and I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about them, and let me know what your favorite books were that you read this year too. I want to know, especially if any of them are the same as mine. So just leave me a comment or whatever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later hopefully. Bye!